A lonely millionaire makes a marriage proposal to an overweight and poor woman, but days later she was surprised to discover the reason. Jacob Miller had always been a man of few words and many possessions. At 50 years old, he owned one of the largest fortunes in the country, built through real estate investments and a network of successful businesses. However, despite all the money and power he had, Jacob was a deeply lonely man. He lived in an isolated mansion, surrounded by security guards, but without friends or family who visited often. Over the years, Jacob had lost trust in people. Friends turned out to be interested only in his wealth, and his romantic relationships never worked out, always marked by superficiality and greed. So, he began to prefer solitude. His days were filled with work and financial transactions, but at night, the vast silence of his mansion echoed the lack of purpose in his life. Everything began to change on an otherwise ordinary day. Jacob had been feeling exhausted for weeks, something he attributed to stress. But when the symptoms intensified, constant fatigue, weight loss, and frequent dizziness, he decided to see a doctor. He didn't expect that this visit would change the course of his life. Sitting in the cold examination room, Jacob barely paid attention to the charts and tests the doctor showed him. His mind was trapped by those words that echoed like thunder in his ears. "Jacob, you're very ill. The disease is serious and progressive. The time you have left is uncertain." Jacob, who always controlled everything in his life with precision, suddenly found himself powerless in the face of his fate. He stared at the doctor with the same coldness he used to close deals, but inside, the reality hit him deeply. He never thought time could be an enemy. He always believed he had control over his future, but now he faced a cruel truth. That night, sitting in his luxurious office, Jacob reflected on his life. The fortune he had built with so much effort now seemed like an empty burden. He had no heirs, and the idea of leaving everything to a foundation or a distant nephew who never visited him didn't appeal to him. He wanted his fortune to go to someone who truly valued it, someone who had fought hard in life, not to maintain a luxurious lifestyle, but to overcome the daily challenges that life imposed. Jacob spent hours thinking. In recent months, whenever he went to the local cafe, he had noticed a woman who deeply intrigued him. Emily Johnson. An overweight woman of modest appearance, but despite the apparent hardships, she always seemed to smile. He watched her interact with other customers, always with a positive attitude, despite the judgmental looks she received. It was clear that her life wasn't easy, but something in her resilience earned Jacob's admiration. He knew that Emily faced prejudice every day, something Jacob with his status had never experienced. Yet she remained strong, working hard and supporting herself with dignity. While the rich people around him lived in a bubble of comfort, Emily seemed to face real challenges without complaining. At that moment, Jacob knew what he needed to do. He didn't want his fortune to be wasted on someone who didn't deserve it. He wanted to leave it to someone he truly admired. And that person was Emily. But how could he approach her without seeming strange or self-interested? Jacob decided that simply leaving his fortune to Emily wasn't enough. He wanted to get to know her, understand her struggle, and offer her an opportunity that would change her life in an unexpected way. And more than that, he wanted her to know that his choice wasn't charity, it was respect. He admired her, and that admiration led him to make an unexpected and bold decision. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, Jacob decided that the next day he would approach Emily. His time was running out, but he wanted to do something meaningful before he left. Something that finally gave his life a sense of meaning. The next morning, when Jacob entered the cafe, his eyes automatically searched for Emily. There she was, as always, serving at the counter. But that day, Jacob wasn't just a silent observer. He needed to talk to her. His heart raced, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He approached the counter, and when Emily saw him, the professional smile she always wore remained. But now, there was a quiet curiosity in her eyes. Jacob had never exchanged more than a few polite words with her, but today would be different. "Can I help you with something, Mr. Miller?" Emily asked, always polite but surprised to see him there so early in the morning when he usually came later, alone, with a newspaper. "Actually, yes. Could you join me at a table when you have a moment?" Jacob said, trying not to sound anxious, but unable to hide the urgency in his voice. Emily hesitated for a moment. It wasn't every day that a customer, especially someone like Jacob Miller, asked her something like that. She knew he was an important man, always well-dressed and serious. But why did he want to talk to her? "Sure, Mr. Miller. I'll just finish up here, and I'll be right with you." As Emily finished serving the last customers, Jacob sat at a table in the corner, watching the cafe's activity with disguised impatience. He knew what he was about to do was unusual, but he also knew he didn't have time to waste. His health was deteriorating quickly, and he needed to act while he still could. A few minutes later, Emily approached the table. She looked a bit nervous, unsure of what to expect. "So, how can I help you, Mr. Miller?" She sat across from him, curious but cautious. Jacob looked at her, taking a deep breath before beginning. "Emily, I know this might sound strange, but there's something I need to tell you. I've been watching you for some time, and before that sounds alarming, let me explain." He tried to smile, but he knew that what he was about to say would change the direction of the conversation. Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised but remained polite. "Watching me? What do you mean?" Jacob straightened in his chair, his hands trembling slightly. "I admire your strength, Emily. I see how you handle what life throws at you, the way you face prejudice, financial struggles, and yet you keep your dignity and kindness. That's something I rarely see, especially in the world I've lived in for so long, and that's why I wanted to speak with you today." Emily, surprised and slightly uncomfortable, just nodded, not sure what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. I don't know what to say. No one really notices those things." "I notice," Jacob said quickly, "and that's why I'm here. Emily, I'm gravely ill, and the truth is, I don't have much time left." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink into the silence that followed. Emily froze for a moment. That wasn't what she expected to hear. I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. That's terrible. But why are you telling me this?" Jacob knew this was the decisive moment. He looked deeply into her eyes, trying to convey the sincerity of what he was about to say. "I don't have any heirs, Emily. I have no one to share what I've built. And I've decided that I don't want to leave my fortune in the hands of people who don't deserve it. I want to leave it to someone who truly understands what it means to fight through life's challenges. And Emily, I want that person to be you." Emily blinked, shocked. This didn't make sense. How could he want to leave everything to her? "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but I don't understand. Why me? There are so many people who could." Jacob gently interrupted. "Because you're different, Emily. You don't give up. I've watched you, and I see how you face life head-on, without complaining, without letting others' judgments bring you down. You're the person I know would do something meaningful with what I leave behind." Emily shook her head, trying to process everything. "But this is crazy. I'm not anyone important. I just do what I need to survive. I'm not like you. I'm not a millionaire. I wouldn't know how to handle something like this." Jacob smiled softly, his tone becoming gentle. "That's exactly why I chose you. You know the value of things, Emily, and that's what matters." Emily stayed silent, the weight of his words falling on her like a storm. Could this be real? How could such an offer come out of nowhere? And why her? But one thing was clear. Jacob Miller was serious. And now, Emily's life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. Jacob slowly stood up, feeling the fatigue in his body, but relieved that he had said what needed to be said. "You don't need to decide now. Just think about it. I'll be here, waiting for your answer." Emily watched him leave the cafe, still stunned, not knowing how to react. What had he just proposed? This couldn't be real, could it? She knew she needed time to process everything, but one thing was certain, nothing would be the same. Jacob left the cafe feeling strangely relieved, though his mind was full of uncertainties. As he crossed the busy streets of the city, he reflected on how the conversation with Emily had gone. The fear of sounding absurd or overly charitable still lingered in his thoughts, but something inside him told him he had made the right choice. He had finally taken the first step to do something meaningful before time ran out. Back at his mansion, the usual loneliness surrounded him. But this time, he didn't feel the same emptiness. Instead, his mind was occupied, thinking about Emily and what she might be pondering now. He knew her decision wouldn't be easy, She was probably feeling confused, and who wouldn't be? The proposal he made was as unusual as it was bold, and even he, who was used to making risky decisions, knew he had risked everything by approaching a stranger with such a peculiar request. In the days that followed, Jacob stayed away from the cafe. He thought it would be better to give Emily some space and time to process what had happened. But he couldn't stop wondering how she was feeling. He knew she was a strong woman, but even the most resilient people needed time to deal with big changes. Emily, on the other hand, couldn't get Jacob out of her mind. His proposal seemed to have turned her life upside down. Not just because of what he offered, a fortune she had never dreamed of, but because of how he saw her. For Emily, being admired by someone like Jacob was something she had never experienced before. He saw more in her than just her physical appearance or financial circumstances. He saw her strength, her struggles, and that touched her deeply. At the same time, fear consumed her. What if it was just another trap from life? Life had already been so hard on her. The idea of trusting someone and then being hurt or disappointed again made her hesitate. Emily knew she needed to talk to someone about it, but who? She didn't have many friends, and her mother, who was now very sick, was the only person she usually confided in. That night, after finishing her shift at the cafe, Emily went to visit her mother in the hospital. The debilitating illness that had taken over her mother's body was a constant reminder of their financial struggles. The medical bills were overwhelming, and Emily fought every month to pay them, sacrificing her own comfort and well-being. As she sat by her mother's bedside, watching her tired face, Emily found herself reflecting on what Jacob had offered. Her mother's weak voice interrupted her thoughts. "Emily, dear, you're so quiet today. What's going on?" Emily hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to worry her mother, but at the same time, she needed to share what was happening. "Mom, something strange happened this week. A man, he made me an offer I never imagined. He said he's seriously ill and wants to leave his entire fortune to me." Emily's mother looked at her with wide eyes, shocked. What do you mean, dear? Who is this man?" Emily took a deep breath and explained about Jacob Miller, the millionaire she served at the cafe, and how he had approached her with this unexpected proposal. After she finished telling the story, her mother remained silent for a moment, trying to absorb what she had just heard. He wants to leave everything to you?" Her mother's voice was incredulous. "That's unbelievable, Emily. Have you thought about what this could mean for your life? For our life?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, Mom. It could solve so many of our problems. I could pay all your medical bills. I could finally breathe. But what if it's not real? What if I accept and then find out it was just another disappointment?" Her mother squeezed her hand tightly. "Emily, you've always been a strong woman. If this man is being sincere, maybe this is your chance to finally have the life you deserve. You've always fought so hard. Maybe it's time to accept something that could help you. But in the end, the decision is yours. Only you can know what's best for you." Those words echoed in Emily's mind. She knew her mother was right. Her life had always been a struggle, and maybe it was time to accept help from someone. But the fear was still there, haunting her. After that conversation with her mother, Emily spent the next few days pondering Jacob's offer. She wondered what he saw in her. Why had he chosen her, out of so many others? The thought of being seen as someone worthy of something so grand scared her, but it also touched her. Later that week, she made her decision. She needed to face Jacob and learn more. She couldn't just ignore what was happening, and she knew that, despite her fear, his proposal could be the opportunity she had always wanted. A chance to change her life and her mother's life forever. That weekend, she decided to return to the cafe where she always saw Jacob. Her heart was racing as she waited for him. When Jacob walked into the cafe, she stood up and went straight to him. "Jacob, we need to talk," Emily said firmly. Jacob, both surprised and relieved, nodded. "Of course, Emily, let's sit down." Once they were seated, Emily began. "I've thought a lot about what you said, and I still can't believe someone like you would choose me for something like this. But I need to understand more. Why me? Why not leave your money to a charity or someone closer to you?" Jacob looked at her with a sincerity that caught her off guard. "Because I see something in you that I've never seen in anyone else." You're strong, Emily. You fight every day, yet you don't let it break you. I have no family, no heirs, and I don't want my fortune to go to someone who doesn't understand what it means to face real challenges. I know this may sound strange, but you've given me a reason to believe that my life and my money can have a real purpose. That's why I chose you." Jacob's words hit Emily like a wave of emotions. She didn't know whether to cry or to thank him. What she did know at that moment was that Jacob was being sincere. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt truly seen, not for her appearance or financial situation, but for who she really was. A strong and resilient woman. The following days were a whirlwind of thoughts for Emily. Jacob's proposal lingered in her mind, and the idea that her life could change so drastically both haunted and intrigued her. Every step at work felt heavier. Every look from the cafe's customers reminded her of the millionaire who had unexpectedly offered her a new reality. But there was one thing Emily needed to make clear. She wasn't willing to be turned into something she wasn't. On the afternoon, she decided to meet Jacob to give him her answer. Emily knew her life stood at a crossroads. She could feel the weight of the decision before her. It wasn't just about accepting financial help. It was a matter of identity. And as tempting as the offer was, Emily knew she had to stand firm. Jacob was already waiting for her at the cafe. He appeared calm, but his eyes showed he was anxious to hear what she had to say. As Emily walked in and approached him, his slight smile disappeared, replaced by a focused expression. He knew her answer could change everything. Emily sat down, looking directly at him. The formalities that had marked their previous conversations had no place here. It was time to speak frankly. Jacob broke the silence first. "I imagine you've given this a lot of thought," he began, his voice lower and more hesitant than usual. "Yes," Emily replied, resolute. "And that's exactly why I'm here. I won't deny it. The proposal you made could change my life. But I want you to know that if I accept, it will be on my terms." Jacob furrowed his brow slightly, but said nothing. He watched her intently, waiting to understand what she really meant. "I've spent my whole life fighting for what's mine, Jacob," Emily continued. "Accepting help has never been easy for me, and now wouldn't be the time for me to accept something that would make me lose the only thing I still have, my freedom. If I'm part of this, I need to know that I'll still be who I am." Jacob listened closely to every word. He had expected that Emily wouldn't simply accept the offer without conditions. He knew she was strong and had principles. That's exactly what had drawn him to her. He didn't see Emily as someone in need of charity, and it was important that she understood that. "I understand," Jacob replied calmly. "I want you to know that what I'm proposing isn't about shaping your life or changing who you are. If change happens, it will be by your choice, not because I impose it. I'm not offering you a life of luxury for luxury's sake, but rather the opportunity to live without the chains that have held you down for so long." Emily looked at him, trying to decipher every word. There was sincerity in what he said, but she still felt the need to protect herself. Accepting this deal would mean leaving behind everything she knew, and that scared her deeply. "You can't expect me to just accept your proposal without question, Jacob. I'm not the kind of person who changes their life for money. If I accept, I'll do it on the condition that I keep my independence, continue my work, and maintain my dignity. I'm not a charity case." Jacob leaned forward slightly, his expression firm. "Emily, I never intended to turn you into something you're not. I chose you because I admire the way you face life's challenges. What I'm offering is a way for you to break free from those hardships, not to redefine you, but to give you the chance to continue being who you are, with more opportunities." Emily listened carefully to Jacob's words and finally realized that he wasn't placing her in a position of inferiority. On the contrary, he was offering her a partnership, an opportunity for both of them to find something that had been missing in their lives. She knew that the money would solve many of her problems, but more than that, she felt that this offer could be a way for her to grow without giving up who she was. "If that's the case," Emily said after a pause, "then I accept. But I want you to understand that, even with this new reality, I will continue being the woman I am. And I will keep working because that's part of who I am." Jacob smiled softly, this time with more confidence. "That's exactly what I expect from you, Emily." Emily felt a mix of relief and excitement. She knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she could see the possibility of a different future. And although there was still some fear in her heart, she knew she had made the right choice. Jacob extended his hand, and Emily shook it, sealing the agreement that would change their lives forever. Emily and Jacob's wedding happened in a way few would have imagined. Without opulence, without guests, and without the usual expectations that surround grand events. It was an extremely simple ceremony, with no public records and no grand celebrations. Only 3 people knew of that moment: Emily, Jacob, and her mother. Privacy was essential, and Jacob wanted the commitment to be about them, not what the world expected. That morning, Jacob's mansion garden was quietly prepared. The sky was clear, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, as if nature itself was giving its silent blessing to the couple. Emily wore a simple white dress with no embellishments. Her hair was loose, blowing in the wind, and her heart raced. She had never imagined her life would take this turn, much less that she would marry under such unusual circumstances. Jacob, on the other hand, stood beside a small table in the center of the garden. His health was visibly fragile, but his eyes gleamed with an unexpected vitality. There was something about that day that gave him strength, and Emily knew that the commitment they were about to make was deeper than just words and rings. As she approached him, she felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, respect, love. Everything seemed to flow naturally, without the formalities that many couples face in large events. There was no audience, no external expectations. It was just Jacob, her, and her mother, watching with a look full of pride and quiet emotion. The justice of the peace, who was there to officiate the union, began the ceremony with simple words. He knew there was no need to prolong the moment. Jacob, always direct, had asked for a brief ceremony without long speeches or extensive promises. For him, the essence of the commitment was what mattered. "Emily," Jacob began, his voice steady though his body was visibly weakened. "Today I'm not just offering you marriage. I'm offering you the last part of myself, something I've never given to anyone else. I know my health is deteriorating, but the time I have, I want to share with you. Not out of obligation, but by choice. You've shown me something I've never found in my entire life: sincerity. And that's why, today, I commit to living by your side, respecting your strength and your courage." Jacob's words touched Emily deeply. She felt a tear well up in her eyes but kept her composure. She knew he was speaking the truth, and it comforted her in a way she had never experienced before. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and looked directly into Jacob's eyes. "Jacob, from the start, you gave me something few people understand: respect. Not for what you have, but for who you are. Today, I'm not accepting this union just as a formal commitment. I'm accepting it because, by your side, I've found a place where I can be myself without fear of judgment. And for that, I commit to being by your side, for however much time we have together." After Emily's words, the justice of the peace concluded the ceremony with a simple gesture. Jacob and Emily exchanged rings, simple bands, but for them, they represented much more than a symbol of union. When the justice declared them husband and wife, there were no applause or loud celebrations, only the soft sound of the wind and the silent looks that conveyed more than words ever could. Jacob, smiling for the first time in a long while, held Emily's hand and gently pulled her closer. "Now we're officially partners," he whispered as they walked away from the table and headed toward the house. Emily's mother, watching from afar, couldn't hold back her tears, though she knew this was the best thing for her daughter. She knew that Emily had found someone who respected her and would do everything to ensure her well-being. The first days after the wedding were full of adjustments. The life they had decided to share was just beginning, but both knew the challenges didn't end there. Jacob, aware of his increasingly frail health, made sure that Emily had control over her new life. He respected her decision to continue working at the cafe and didn't push her to live differently. However, something neither of them could control were the stares and rumors that started after the wedding. Although the event had been kept secret, Jacob's behavior alongside Emily didn't go unnoticed by those who frequented the cafe. Emily's change in routine was soon noticed by the most curious customers. "She married him, didn't she? It's obvious," some murmured. "Who would have guessed? A cafe worker, now married to a millionaire. What did she see in him? Or maybe it's the other way around." Others whispered, not bothering to hide the malice in their words. Emily heard the comments but tried to remain calm. Even though she had prepared herself for the criticism, the sting of the harsh words still affected her. She knew her marriage to Jacob wouldn't be easily understood by many, but even so, she stood firm in her decision. One afternoon, after a particularly tough day at the cafe, Emily arrived at Jacob's mansion feeling exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Jacob, who was sitting in his office chair, noticed the tension on her face as soon as she walked in. Without a word, he extended his hand, inviting her to sit beside him. "Rough day?" he asked softly, already knowing the answer. Emily nodded, taking the cup of tea Jacob had prepared for her. "People are talking, a lot. They look at me differently, as if everything I've done was just for your money." Jacob sighed, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Emily. I knew this would happen, but that doesn't make their words hurt any less. I know those people don't matter, but sometimes it feels like all my hard work, everything I've done for myself, is being thrown away because of what they think," Emily said, her voice heavy with frustration. Jacob held her hand tightly, his voice more firm now. "You know that's not true. I know who you are, and the people who matter know it too. The rest is just noise. Don't let it make you doubt who you are or what we're building." With those words, Emily found some relief. She knew that walking this path with Jacob would be full of challenges, but she was willing to face each one. And in that moment, she understood that, despite all the difficulties, she had found something rare: a partnership built on respect, trust, and truth. For Emily, the marriage represented much more than her union with Jacob. It was a daily battle against the judgments and prejudices that had only intensified since people began to suspect their relationship. At the cafe, the gossip didn't stop. Every day, the comments seemed to grow more cruel and relentless, as if people felt entitled to have an opinion about her life. Emily, who had always faced everything with her head held high, now felt the weight of public scrutiny with every move she made. She can't be doing this for love. Who marries a man so much older and sick? No less. Emily overheard one customer whisper to another while she served coffee. Another day, an old customer, who used to be friendly, made a sarcastic remark as he paid his bill. "So, now you're the millionaire's wife, huh? Must be enjoying the high life." Those words, seemingly trivial, started to affect Emily more deeply than she wanted to admit. Even though she knew other people's opinions didn't matter, it was hard to ignore the judgmental stares that followed her everywhere. The cafe, which once felt like her refuge, now felt suffocating. Jacob, for his part, began to notice that the emotional strain was affecting Emily, even though she tried to hide it. Already fighting his own battle with illness, he felt powerless to protect her completely from the outside world. His support was constant, but Jacob knew there were some battles Emily would have to face on her own. One evening, after returning from work, Emily sat in the living room with Jacob, feeling drained. She was tired of the insinuations and invasive questions. The silence between them was comforting, but it was also filled with unspoken tension. Jacob sensed that it was time to address what had been lingering for days. "Emily, you know you can talk to me, don't you?" Jacob broke the silence, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Emily sighed deeply, staring at the floor for a moment before lifting her eyes to meet his. "I know, Jacob. It's just that everything feels different now. People see me in a way I never thought they would. And the worst part is, I'm starting to doubt myself. What if, in some way, they're right?" Jacob immediately leaned forward, his expression serious. "They're not right, Emily. Not even close. You made this commitment for your own reasons, and no one else has the right to question them. Those people, they don't know who you really are. They only see what they want to see." "But it's getting hard, Jacob," she confessed, her voice finally breaking. "I didn't care what others thought before, but now it feels like I'm carrying the weight of everyone's opinion on my shoulders." Jacob took her hands, squeezing them firmly, his expression sincere. "You're stronger than that, Emily, and what we're building, is real. Don't let that noise make you doubt who you are or what we're doing together. I see your struggle, and I admire you for it." Jacob's words provided some comfort, but Emily knew that, deep down, what troubled her most wasn't just what others were saying, but the doubts she was beginning to feel herself. She knew that marrying Jacob would put her in a difficult position, but she hadn't expected it to make her question her own identity. That same night, while Jacob rested, Emily walked through the mansion's garden, trying to find some relief in the fresh night air. The sky was filled with stars, and the silence around her felt like a welcome pause after such tumultuous days. She reflected on everything that had happened since the wedding. As much as she wanted to believe that the criticism and cruel looks didn't matter, they were slowly eating away at her from within. Emily felt an increasing pressure. The responsibility to meet Jacob's expectations, to face society's judgment, and at the same time to not lose her own essence. She knew that Jacob trusted her, that he saw her as a true partner, and that motivated her to keep fighting. But deep down, she questioned if she could withstand the rising tide of prejudice and challenges that seemed to grow each day. Yet, despite her doubts, something inside Emily remained steady. She knew that with Jacob, she had found a rare connection, something that transcended their circumstances and the limited time they had together. It was this certainty that kept her grounded, despite all the obstacles. The days that followed were a mix of highs and lows. Every day, Emily tried to find her balance between working at the cafe and her life with Jacob. The criticisms continued, but she forced herself to ignore them. Jacob, on the other hand, began facing new health complications, something he tried to hide from Emily as much as possible. He knew his time was running out, and the thought of leaving Emily alone consumed him more and more. As both their internal and external battles intensified, they realized that the true test of their union was only just beginning. What they would face together in the days and months to come would challenge the limits of their love, strength, and endurance. But amidst all of this, one certainty grew. No matter how difficult the circumstances, Emily and Jacob were determined to make every moment they had left together count. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. As the days passed, Jacob's health began to deteriorate more noticeably. The vigor he once showed in trying to maintain a normal life was fading quickly. Emily, who had mentally prepared herself for this reality from the start, began to realize that the time they had together would be shorter than she had imagined. Despite this, she remained composed, determined to support Jacob in the best way she could. The mansion, once quiet and serene, now saw more frequent visits from doctors. Jacob, though proud, knew his strength was slipping away, but he never let on just how serious his condition had become. He wanted the remaining days to be about peace and connection, not the illness that was slowly consuming him. One morning, Jacob woke up in intense pain, forcing him to stay in bed longer than usual. Emily, who was by his side, immediately sensed that this would be a harder day than the ones before. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she held his hand gently, as if trying to transmit some strength through her touch. "You look tired," she said softly, her eyes searching for some reassurance to ease her worries. Jacob smiled faintly. "I think my body is finally giving me the warning I've been ignoring for a long time." Emily leaned in, her heart heavy. "You don't have to fight alone anymore, Jacob. I'm here, and I'll be with you until the end." Emily's words sounded like a silent promise. She knew the days ahead would test not only him, but also herself, as she would need to be the rock that held everything together. It was a challenge she had never expected to face, but somehow she felt ready for it. Jacob, grateful for Emily's support, carried a burden he didn't want to share. He knew the end was approaching faster than expected, and the thought of leaving her alone tormented him. He had fought to build something with Emily, and now, with time running out, he felt it hadn't been enough. That afternoon, while Jacob rested, Emily walked through the mansion's gardens, as she often did when she needed to clear her mind. The fresh breeze and the sound of rustling leaves helped calm her spirit, but her mind remained restless. Doubt, fear, and the pain of losing Jacob were emotions she tried to hide, but they grew stronger every day. That same afternoon, Jacob, who had asked to be left alone for a few minutes, wrote a letter. He knew he wouldn't be able to express everything he felt directly to Emily, but he needed her to know how much her presence had transformed his final days. Even in the midst of pain, he wanted her to know that she had been his greatest strength. When Emily returned to the house, Jacob's expression had changed. Though still fragile, there was a glow in his eyes, as if he had made peace with what was to come. "Emily," he began with difficulty, "there's something I need to tell you." She came closer, sitting beside him. "What is it, Jacob? You brought something into my life that I never found before. And I'm not talking about love in a romantic sense, but a type of companionship I didn't even know I needed. And for that, I want you to know that when I'm gone, everything I've built will be yours. It's not about the money or the possessions. It's about leaving something for someone who made every one of my final days worthwhile." Emily felt the tears forming but tried to keep her composure. She knew this moment was coming, but hearing Jacob talk about a future without him was devastating. "Jacob, you don't have to talk about this now. We still have time." He shook his head with a soft smile. "Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but it's important that you know, you changed my life in a way I could never repay." Jacob handed her the letter he had written earlier. "This letter is for you. When I'm gone, I want you to read it. It will say everything I couldn't express in words here." Emily held the letter carefully, feeling the symbolic weight it carried. She knew the moment she dreaded was drawing nearer, but she also knew that Jacob was at peace with what was to come. In the days that followed, Jacob spent most of his time in bed, and Emily remained by his side, holding his hand, reading to him, and trying to make his last moments as comfortable as possible. The doctor's visits became more frequent, but Emily knew that, at this point, what Jacob needed most wasn't medical care, but companionship. And then one quiet afternoon, under the soft sunlight that filled Jacob's room, he passed away. There was no intense pain, no prolonged suffering. He simply closed his eyes and let the exhaustion finally take him. Emily was by his side, holding his hand until the very end. The silence that followed was deep and heavy. The pain of loss enveloped Emily like a wave, but at the same time, there was a sense of peace. She knew she had done everything she could, that she had been with Jacob until the end, and that he had passed in peace, knowing he was loved and respected. Jacob's funeral was quiet, just as he had wanted. Few people attended. Emily made sure it was a private event, away from the curious eyes and gossip that had always surrounded their relationship. Alongside her mother and a few of Jacob's closest staff, Emily said her goodbyes in a silent, intimate manner. There was a solemn acceptance that Jacob had lived his final days the way he wanted, honestly and with someone who respected him for who he truly was. That night, alone in the room she once shared with Jacob, Emily finally opened the letter. His words, written with such care, touched her heart in ways she hadn't expected. Jacob hadn't just left behind a material legacy. He had left an emotional one, a reminder that she was strong, resilient, and capable of facing whatever challenges life would bring. After the funeral, the reality of Emily's new life began to unfold. As the heir to a considerable fortune, she now faced decisions and responsibilities she had never imagined. The bank accounts, properties, stocks, all of it was now in her name. But Jacob's legacy wasn't just financial. He had entrusted her with something far more important: control over her own destiny. Even with the fresh pain of loss, Emily knew she couldn't remain idle. The cafe, once her refuge, now seemed distant from her new reality. Returning to work wouldn't be the same. People knew she had inherited Jacob's fortune, and the once hidden glances had become open and judgmental. "So now she's rich," some would say, not even bothering to whisper, "I bet she won't need to work like us anymore." These comments no longer surprised her. Emily had prepared herself for the wave of envy and judgment, but what bothered her most was the feeling that, somehow, people believed she had won something without fighting for it. What they didn't know was the price she had paid: the loss of Jacob, a man she deeply respected, and the emotional burden she carried every day. Determined to honor Jacob's legacy in a meaningful way, Emily decided she wouldn't let the criticism or judgments define her. She knew she held power in her hands. Not just financial power, but the ability to do something significant with all that Jacob had left her. And above all, She knew she could use that strength to help others who, like her, had faced hardships and prejudice. Without delay, Emily began searching for ways to turn Jacob's fortune into something that could truly impact lives. She remembered how Jacob spoke about the struggles people faced in finding dignity amid hardships, something he saw as essential to human well-being. Inspired by his vision, Emily started planning what would become a major project. A foundation in Jacob's name, dedicated to supporting social causes, helping those facing prejudice, and providing opportunities to people who might otherwise never have them. The first steps in creating the foundation were challenging. Emily, who had spent most of her life far from the world of business, now found herself surrounded by lawyers, accountants, and advisors, helping her understand what it meant to manage a fortune. However, each meeting, each decision, brought with it memories of Jacob and the desire to do something he would be proud to see. Over the weeks, the Jacob Miller Foundation began to take shape. The goal was clear: to offer scholarships, fund small entrepreneurs, and create programs to empower people from humble backgrounds. Emily wanted Jacob's money to be used to create real, lasting change, something that reflected the way he had transformed both his life and hers. But while Emily worked on building the foundation, the pain of losing Jacob was a constant presence. Often, in the quiet of the mansion, she would find herself sitting in the chair where Jacob used to rest, feeling his absence almost physically. The letter he had left her was kept in a special place, and although she had read it already, she would often reread it in moments of longing. Jacob's words, written with such care, echoed in Emily's mind. "You showed me the true meaning of partnership. It's not about how much time we have, but about what we do with that time. Life is short, but you gave me something eternal. The certainty that, by your side, I found peace." Those words guided her in every decision, in each new step in building the foundation. Emily knew that what they had built together was something much larger than any fortune. It was a legacy that would live far beyond both of them. As the months passed, the foundation gained recognition and began impacting lives in ways Emily couldn't have imagined. People from different parts of the country began benefiting from the programs, and Jacob's vision for a fairer, more dignified world was finally coming to life. Emily knew that, even though he was no longer physically by her side, his spirit and influence remained in everything she did. However, even with the foundation's success, there was something Emily still had to face: grief. She had thrown herself into the work to cope with the loss, but she knew that eventually she would have to confront the pain and the longing for Jacob on a deeper level. And it was one night, months after his death, that this reality hit her hard. Sitting in the mansion's garden, under the same starry sky that had witnessed so many conversations and moments with Jacob, Emily finally allowed herself to cry. The pain she had been holding back for so long finally surfaced, and she let herself feel the full weight of the sadness and emptiness his absence left behind. But in the midst of the tears, there was also a sense of gratitude. She knew that the time they had spent together had been brief, but she also knew that their love, their partnership, had transformed both of their lives. Jacob had given her not just a financial inheritance, but a purpose. And because of that, Emily knew that, no matter how difficult it was to move forward, she would continue to honor his memory in everything she did. That night, as the stars sparkled in the sky and a gentle breeze swept through the garden, Emily closed her eyes and made a silent promise to herself. She would keep living, keep fighting, and make every moment count, because that's what Jacob would have wanted. As much as she tried to focus on the foundation, Emily knew she needed something more. Something that would help her turn the page and live for herself, not just for Jacob's legacy. But before she could move forward, she would have to face her grief head-on. One evening, while going through some of Jacob's belongings, she found an old key in an envelope. The paper had his name written simply, with a short message beside it: "For when you're ready." Intrigued, Emily stared at the key for a few minutes, trying to grasp its meaning. There was no explanation, only a sense that it held more significance than she realized. The next day, after a meeting with Jacob's lawyer, she discovered that the key belonged to a secret property, a small country house he had never mentioned to anyone, not even to her. The discovery shook Emily in ways she hadn't expected. Why would Jacob have kept this from her? What was the purpose of the house? The mystery consumed her, and she knew she couldn't rest until she found the answers. Determined, Emily went to the property. The house was in a secluded area, surrounded by tall trees with a river running beside it. When she arrived, she was overwhelmed with emotion. The place was small but had a peaceful, welcoming beauty. It seemed like something Jacob would have cherished in secret, far from the chaos of the city and business. As she stepped inside, a whirlwind of emotions engulfed her. The walls, decorated with old photos, revealed a side of Jacob she had never known. Here, he seemed younger, free of responsibilities. Some of the photos showed a smiling Jacob, alongside friends Emily had never heard of. And then, on one of the shelves, she found something that took her breath away. A letter addressed to her. With trembling hands, Emily opened the envelope. Jacob's words were direct, yet filled with emotion. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. There are so many things I wish I had said but didn't have the courage to while I was alive. This house is my final gift to you. Here, I found the peace I searched for all my life. I didn't want to involve you in it before because I knew you needed to find your own path. But now this house is yours. It's a place for you to breathe, to remember that life goes on even after loss. Here, I want you to know it's okay to move forward. It's okay to live fully, without carrying the guilt of my absence." The tears finally came. Emily read and reread the letter, feeling the depth of every word. Jacob knew she would need time to heal, and somehow he had anticipated that this would be the place where she could begin to do so. The small country house, hidden from the world, was not just a retreat. It was a place where she could reconnect with herself. In the days that followed, Emily returned to the house many times. There, sitting by the river, she began to feel something she hadn't in months: peace. Each visit seemed to wash away a little more of the pain, as if Jacob was still there in spirit, helping her move forward. The foundation continued to grow, but now Emily was determined to expand its impact in a more personal way. Inspired by her new discovery, she created a special retreat program for young people dealing with grief and emotional struggles. She knew better than anyone how hard it was to process loss and pain, and wanted others to find the same kind of healing she was beginning to experience. During a charity event for the foundation where Emily presented her new program, she was approached by a young woman named Sarah, one of the first beneficiaries of the project. Sarah, visibly emotional, shared her story. "I lost my parents 2 years ago, and I never knew how to deal with the pain. I was lost, with no direction, until I found the retreat you created. Those days were transformative for me. I felt a peace I hadn't known since they passed. Thank you, Emily. What you're doing is saving lives." Sarah's words made Emily realize something profound. Jacob's legacy wasn't just hers. It had spread and touched other lives in ways she couldn't have imagined. The foundation wasn't just a tribute to him, but a way to continue impacting the world and helping those most in need. Despite the foundation's success and growth, Emily knew the key to her happiness lay in balancing the past with the future. Selling Jacob's mansion was a difficult but necessary decision. She felt that by letting go of the grand property, she was finally allowing life to take its natural course. With the money from the sale, Emily expanded the foundation's reach even further, creating support centers for underserved communities and offering resources to people facing struggles similar to those she and Jacob had experienced. Every new project seemed to renew her sense of purpose. The country house, however, became her true home. It wasn't a luxurious mansion, but for Emily, it was the place where she finally found herself. She had overcome the doubts, the judgments, and the grief. And while Jacob was always present in her memory, Emily knew he had prepared her for something greater: to live fully, without regrets, knowing she had fulfilled the purpose they had built together. One afternoon, as she watched the sunset from the porch of the house, Emily smiled to herself, feeling a lightness in her heart she hadn't felt in a long time. The gentle breeze gave her the sense that Jacob, in some way, was there with her, watching everything she had achieved. And so, as the shadows of night began to lengthen, Emily realized that her new chapter was just beginning. She had so much more to live for. and Jacob had been just the start of a much bigger journey. What do you think? Did Emily make the right choice by marrying Jacob? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Your participation is really important to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you for watching.